Let's get ready to rumble!
A lot of people will say things and justify things on certain items that they, on certain things that they don't understand. I'm a boxer, I'm an athlete, and that's what's important. I understand that very well, and I can talk on that. As far as politics, I can't talk about COVID because I'm not a doctor. I'm not somebody who understands it. I can't talk about politics in the same in the same understanding because I just don't have the knowledge to be able to talk about it. But overall, the situation with the flag, I mean, at the end of the day, my job here is to be an athlete, and it's about sportsmanship, it's about the competition, and about winning the fight. And I think that's what's important, and I think everybody would agree on that. And by that time, hopefully things are going to be in peace, and hopefully things are going to be changing by May, and I'll be able to walk into the fight just as I always did before.
100%. Let's not ask Dimitri Bivol about the invasion. Keep it to boxing-related questions. He's not a politician. He doesn't represent Putin. He doesn't represent anyone who agrees with Putin, from what I hear. Sports, music, entertainment, films are a needed distraction from a lot of the shit that happens in the world. Stop asking this guy about the invasion. No more questions directed there. No more. Let him do his job. Everything boxing, he's becoming another source's go-to guy on social media. They kind of look like they're on the cusp of breaking news all the time, but for the most part, they're just shifting around second-hand information, but they're consistent. Can't knock the hustle. He says Eddie Hearn has hinted that Demetrius Andrade could leave Matchroom after the Zach Parker fight. Well, couldn't nail the Munguia fight, couldn't nail the Golovkin fight, couldn't nail the Canelo fight. Not much more Eddie can do. Not much more Andrade can do. Is he giving up that 160-pound belt, or are they simultaneously letting him hold both belts while he challenges Zach Parker for the 168 strap? Because the Johnny Beck Munguia fight is just an interim fight. Where does he go? PBC? What, you think going to PBC is going to force Charlo into the ring? And Benavidez, his promoter, said that David needed $7 million to fight Andrade, apparently. Benavidez tried to clean it up and say, no. Eddie hasn't made an offer to me. I don't need $7 million. Let's make the fight. Yeah. Your promoter spoke already. That fight ain't happening. I've been listening to a lot of Virgil Hunter, Anthony Joshua. The boxing scene don't seem to understand if AJ is taking personal advice one-on-one, or if he's just listening to videos and audio of Hunter teaching his training methods. But put two and two together, Hunter has been training Joshua Buatsi, and through that association, it's not too much of a stretch of the imagination that AJ's hooked up with Virgil. I mean, now if it is Virgil Hunter, some people are going to be delighted and say, yeah, that's where you need to go. And some people are going to be on the opposite side of the scale and say, this is a disaster. The only person that Virgil has trained to any real success is Andre Ward. Me, I stand in the middle on this because there is no theory you can bring whether the chemistry between the two works or not. You can only judge a trainer-fighter relationship when the results are produced. You can get the best super coach and super fighter and put them together, and there's no guarantees that it's going to garner results. For years, they used to tell Joe Calzaghe to get rid of Enzo, his dad. Get a more name-brand established coach. Frank Warren used to tell Joe Calzaghe, get rid of your dad, because nobody knew about Enzo, but they stuck with it. And Joe is regarded as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters that Britain has ever produced. R.I.P. Enzo Calzaghe. Now, I believe it will be a successful relationship, but I have no proof on that. I think whatever Andre Ward, what weaknesses Ward saw in Joshua that had him talking about potentially fighting Joshua is something that he may have discussed with Virgil Hunter, or if not, Virgil Hunter saw the same things that Andre saw, because Virgil trained Andre for his whole life, every single fight he had. And out of all them coaches that Joshua was talking to in America or working with, this week he's saying, I listened to Virgil Hunter. He's my guy. So he's saying stuff to him that obviously makes a lot of sense. And look, fuck it, man. You can't 100% go into anything and it works. You can't do that. Eventually, You have to pick a coach and fight. It doesn't matter what Virgil teaches him. If he doesn't replicate and reproduce in the ring, it doesn't matter. I believe Virgil will iron out a lot of flaws, technical flaws and weaknesses, and I don't think Ward would be so enthusiastic about taking on a Virgil Hunter trained Joshua as he was a Rob McCracken trained Joshua. Is this who Joshua's going to announce as his new trainer? And with Alexander Usyk having more pressing issues right now over there in the Ukraine, are they going to take their time and not rush to get back out there? Eddie was saying that Joshua needs to be out there in May or June. But are they going to rush? Like I was saying, yeah, take on Wilder, take on Joyce, and that would be all good. But they may go down the pecking order and test out Joshua's skills and test out what Virgil's teaching him against a lower tier opponent. Now, that's going to court a lot of criticism. They're going to demand that he fights the ranked contenders, but it's not like he is under pressure to get the belts back because of a rematch clause. AJ was fast-tracked early in his career. A nice soft touch to get his confidence back, and then a ranked contender, maybe an interim fight next, like I was saying, Joyce or Wilder. Seems like a good route back to me. And let's be honest, it would be better if Usyk was injured and the fight got postponed than the Ukraine people suffering and the Russian people suffering. Without all that, it might not be the worst thing that AJ isn't going straight into a fight with Usyk. I would back AJ to win, but it might not be the worst thing. So Tyson Fury has had a lot to say about Jack Catterall's controversial loss to Josh Taylor, saying the judges have absolutely destroyed the beaten challenger's life and career. Perhaps a bit extreme, but he's been in the ring and he knows what it's like. I remember he was very disappointed to lose his winning record with the draw against Wilder. Fury said, I think the judges these days are a disgrace. This is what he told BT Sport. I think they need a good kick in the ASS for it. They can't change the decision now, and they've destroyed Catterall's life and career. It's disgraceful. Well, let's hope Jack's life isn't destroyed, and let's hope that Josh Taylor, his life isn't destroyed. They're saying he's been subjected to appalling abuse after the controversial fight. John Dennon from the Boxing News, he's reported that MTK management that represents both fighters, Catterall and Taylor, that no matter what you think of the result or what the decision should have been, it wasn't in the fighters' hands. It laid in the hands of the judging officials. MTK Global is saddened and deeply concerned to learn of results, personal attacks, and even death threats targeting the fighters, their partners, and their families. This has to stop immediately. And let's face it, a lot of individuals in society are just not the full ticket. Why are you going after Josh Taylor? Why are you not going after the judges, Ian John Lewis and the other judge who scored it to Josh Taylor? I'm not saying they should do that. They should find something better to do with their time. But why are you going after Josh and not the judges? It's just that lynch mob mentality, isn't it? Tyson Fury also backs a rule change on scoring and introduce open scoring, and Canelo Alvarez backs that too. Well, I'll tell you what, Tyson, let's get that open scoring back on that John McDermott fight you had. And Canelo needs to step lightly if we're talking about controversial decisions. He's had a few in his favour. So Joe Markowski is having to do a clean-up job here about the economic reality of having Canelo Alvarez on your network. They cannot compensate Canelo for his asking price without airing the fights on pay-per-view, although they've done it before. So DAZN have streamed 6 Canelo fights as part of its base subscription package from December 2018 until May the 8th. But this is no longer sustainable unless they charge more than $99.99 a year or $19.99 a month. If you're not signed up to DAZN, you will pay $79.99 for the BIVOL fight. But that will include 1 month's worth of DAZN content after May the 7th. So that's a better deal than what you got for Caleb Plant and Canelo on the PBC. And annual and monthly subscribers can buy that same fight for $59.99. Consumers can avoid the app entirely through traditional pay-per-view platforms, namely DirecTV and In Demand. Purchasing the Alvarez BIVOL card through cable and satellite operators will likely cost $79.99, but that price hasn't been released by DAZN as of Friday morning. Well, if you don't want DAZN long term, you might as well just purchase the pay-per-view through the app, because you get a month's worth of content. You might as well just go through there. And then after that, you can wash your hands of it. You're basically mugging yourself off if you get it through DirecTV or Demand, because you're just going to get one pay-per-view and book. That's it. Now, Markowski is acknowledging that prematurely predicting pay-per-view's demise was a mistake. We are learning. Because people, they don't forget these things. Markowski says, I'm not going to try and pretend that was just a marketing campaign or I was just poking the bear. At the time, DAZN genuinely believed that this was going to be the case. He says they're humble enough and honest enough to admit that maybe, in hindsight, we got that wrong. Ultimately, do we still maintain the commitment to value of our customers? Absolutely. Well, he is humble enough to admit, but the main promoter, Eddie Hearn, hasn't been humble enough to admit that he got it wrong. And people are quoting extracts of film footage of him saying that pay-per-view is finished. And Eddie still comes on and said, I never said it. You did say it. You did say it. And until Eddie humbles himself, he deserves a lot of the stick that he's getting. Humble yourself. You made a mistake and move on. This ego thing needs to calm down. Markowski also emphasized that DAZN will use pay-per-view sparingly, mostly for Alvarez fights, and if there's any upcoming title fights, including involving Anthony Joshua. So look, Alan Smith can forget it, yeah? I mean, is there any logic that Joshua signs to MATCHROOM to promote him for life and then doesn't fight on DAZN when they're getting this pay-per-view platform off and he goes back on the Sky platform? There's just no way. Eddie said we don't get to tell AJ to go on the DAZN platform, blah, blah. No. He's going to be fighting on DAZN pay-per-view. We're going to be charged in the UK. They won't charge the American market because they're not in a primetime location for the fight. They're not going to charge them. But we're going to be charged because this is primetime content and primetime viewing. That's how that works. Markowski still believes that DAZN are top of the tree in terms of value, and he believes they have spent wisely on 2 more fights involving Canelo, which could earn Canelo more than $100 million combined for the BIVOL and Golovkin fight. Al Heyman offered Canelo comparable money to fight Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez, and if Canelo went over that side of the street, Al would have put that on pay-per-view too. Of course he would have done. But Canelo, I think he's done the right thing by being loyal to DAZN, because that PBC money is still going to be there in a year's time. That's if he can beat Bivol and Golovkin. It's still going to be there. What's the truth though? Most of us knew at some stage that DAZN were going to do a little bait and switch and hit us with pay-per-view. We knew this. But the fact that Eddie is saying that I never said it was dead, and, that's what pisses people off, is why are you engaging in this I didn't say? You did say it. Just come clean like Joe did. It's no point Joe really coming clean because nobody really cares if Joe comes clean. Eddie is the guy, the front man, the promoter, the one with the sales pitch. Eddie needs to climb down off his high horse, so all the people saying, oh, I remember when you said that, but did something else. He can say, okay, well, hands up. I was wrong. Some people will never let that die, obviously. But just put your hands up. How good was Wilfredo Gomez? He won titles at free weights, super bantam, feather, and super feather. He beat the likes of Carlos Zarate, 52-0, bona fide Hall of Famer, all-time great. Zarate was stepping up from bantamweight, where he dominated and was destroyed by the 6 skills, and 6 skills of Wilfredo Gomez. People talk about the punching power, but the man had some serious skills. I have to be careful about stereotyping a demographic of fighters, but the 80s was just filled with skilled Puerto Rican fighters. Camacho, Gomez, Benitez, Edwin Rosario. They slipped punches very well, counterattacked brilliantly. Gomez has knockouts over the likes of Luke Pintor, two-weight champion, bantam and super bantam. Great fighter. He was honoured by the WBC just the other day. They gave him a gold and green belt. Gomez was like a king in Puerto Rico. I remember watching a documentary on YouTube, and he was very generous with his money, helping out whoever needed a hand. How popular was Wilfredo Gomez? Well, bear this in mind. In 1981, on a Don King promoted event, he faced off against Salvador Sanchez in a bona fide super fight at featherweight. 1981, Sanchez was paid a purse of $750,000. Featherweights. Gomez was paid a purse of $500,000 for two featherweights in 1981. It's a fortune. So when I hear news that he's being dragged out of some house in a wheelchair and he was living in squalor, legs all swollen up, unable to speak coherently, living in inhumane conditions amidst disturbing reports regarding his personal well-being, his mental health. He's been admitted to a psychiatric institution. Yeah, it's tough, man. It's a tough one. You know, people will say that he fought on longer than what he should, but there are no sharp exit strategies in this sport here. In terms of this fairy book ending that some of us want for fighters, fighters have to take what they're given in terms of how their careers end. Yeah, you can say he should have retired after the beating he took from Azuma Nelson. He was lured back in the ring some 5 months later in '85 to take on Rocky Lockridge. And he took Lockridge's World Boxing Association super featherweight title. But it was a robbery. I'm here to say that now. I've watched the fight and it's a robbery. Not all this over the top Jack Catterrall type of robbery, because, okay, like Catterrall, he was in the Lions Den, away from home, Puerto Rico. And he actually out-muscled, out-punched. He took it to him. He took the fight to Gomez. Catterrall was clever at times, but it was nowhere near a thorough performance like what Lockridge put in. That's a robbery, proper robbery. And Lockridge actually done severe damage to his throat that left him with a severe speech impediment. And he was never the same after that. It made me think about Wilfred Benitez. I know he's in a care facility, and boxing left him in pretty bad shape. Two great Puerto Rican fighters. I wonder how Benitez is bearing up. Read through the article, and they're saying here that Carolina Gamboa, Gomez's estranged wife is how they describe her, and former champion Victor Calles. They see another skilled Puerto Rican fighter who hit like thunder. You know what I mean? In fact, I'll give you a link to a video I've done about Victor Calles. Just a very short video. Make sure you check it out. They asked authorities to investigate Gomez's current condition after being unable to communicate with him for over a year. His ex-wife and Calles actually assisted him out of the house with the authorities. Let's hope he can get the help he needs. We can do no more than that. Send him your prayers and your blessings. Volume 133. This is what I said about Amir Khan. And it came right. Khan seemed to be intimating that retirement could be imminent, but the ego doesn't go down that easy. And I wouldn't be shocked that maybe a week or even a month or whatever time period necessary that he doesn't evoke the rematch clause and say, this didn't go right in training camp and this and that. And he goes from being all gracious to, yo, Kel didn't really beat the real Amir.
I've heard actually that Amir Khan is going to invoke the rematch clause, bizarrely, and people have already been contacting us saying, would you like to pay us step aside to not invoke the rematch clause? No, you're all right, thanks. You go and do Khan Brook 2, and we'll crack on.
So it looks like Eddie's got to look elsewhere to find an old boy for Conor Benn to spark, because, you know, they've done a good job with Conor so far, no doubt promoting him and matchmaking him. but he's not fighting anyone in their prime. And when I say prime, I'm not saying go take on Crawford or Spence or anything like that, but the David Avanesian fight for the European title should be a realistic goal if he's as good as MATCHROOM are touting him to be. Yeah, no shock that Khan invoked the rematch clause, none at all. The question is, though, is it just a ploy to try to get that step-aside money to allow Kell to fight Conor, or does he genuinely want the Brook fight? I mean, I don't think Sky are going to pay for a second one. It certainly has no pay-per-view value a second time around. Certainly not. So I think this was just a money grab by Khan. I mean, it wasn't exactly a competitive fight where there'd be any interest to see a second fight. So Khan was just looking for that step-aside money, it seems. Not quite. And anyway, Kell Brooks wrote it off because, according to Conor, he was asking for something like 10 mil for the fight. Not happening. Kell should call Khan's bluff and say, yeah, come on, let's do it, ASAP. So Martinez took the fight on 5 weeks' notice. Credit for him doing that. Like, it's not a title fight. He came in 2 pounds over the weight. 1.4 he came back. There's a 10% rule according to Eddie when they weigh in tomorrow. Now Martinez craftily or wisely, depending which way you want to go with it, had 2 more hours to make the contracted weight of 115. But he didn't do that. He didn't want to deplete himself too much. So the 10% rule, I don't do maths and I'm not going to do all the research like that. As long as he doesn't put on too much weight overnight, the fight's good to go. Now, Team Chocolatito, they're kind of pissed off. They're threatening to pull out. This Sonny Edwards guy has just become the biggest clout chaser, and Eddie Hearn seems to be his biggest clout chasing tool recently, saying that he'll fly over to fight Roman Gonzalez. And although I would get slight pleasure watching Gonzalez pound the resistance out of him, I mean, it's just ridiculous, really, isn't it? No, I wouldn't want Gonzalez to end his career or permanently maim him or nothing like that, but Sonny's getting annoying. You're getting annoying. So according to the California State Athletic Commission, Martinez will be penalized 20% of his purse for failing to make the weight. Half of the fine will go to the commission and the other half will go to Gonzalez. According to the commission, Martinez will have to weigh in on the day of the fight at 12 noon Pacific time. He will be fined again if he weighs more than 10% above the contracted weight limit. If he weighs more than 15% above the contracted weight limit, the fight will automatically be cancelled. And he's going to miss out on a payday. So obviously Team Gonzalez don't want to lose their payday. And because Martinez is coming up from flyweight, it's not like he's a bantamweight who's going to go and rehydrate and come in near featherweight or anything like that. I think that's why they agreed to not cancel the fight. You can see, for once, Roman's bigger than one of his opponents. The fight's still on. They weighed in very early, didn't they, at 9 a.m. Eddie is defending Martinez, saying, well, he tried his best to make the weight. But the fact that he didn't use the last 2 hours to try and make the contracted weight, what does that tell me? Well, there's not a belt on the line, so he's thinking to himself, I don't need to make the weight. I'm not going to get a title or anything like that. All right, he's going to pay a little bit of a fine. But like Marcus Caballero, Gonzalez's head trainer, was saying, he didn't run. He didn't use the full 2 hours. That means he wants an advantage. He still has water in his body. And I agree with him. I agree. Hopefully we get an exhibition of infighting. They can show a lot of these whippersnappers how it's done. Josh Warrington, conqueror, Mauricio Lara. He's on the card. He takes on Emiliano Sanchez. And he's got an eye on a third shot at Warrington. I'm guessing he's banking on Warrington taking out Kiko Martinez. And Lara being ranked number 3. And actually, like, this is an old rating they haven't updated. Look, Josh Warrington's not even ranked. And he's getting a shot over Mauricio Lara. How does Warrington get a shot over Lara when Lara knocked him out and a rematch was a no contest? How do you get a shot over Lara? Too much politics, and I'm guessing Eddie's going to get in there and use his influence if Warrington is successful against Martinez, because he's not going to want Lara as a first defense for Warrington. He's not going to want it. But here's a quick look into how crooked boxing is. Let's remember that Warrington gave the belt up rather than defend against Kid Galahad. Kid Galahad beat Jazza Dickens for the belt. Warrington got knocked out by Mauricio Lara. So, according to Fight News, who doesn't look like they've updated since late last year, Warrington wasn't even ranked by the IBF. He hasn't won a fight since he vacated the belt in 2019. He got knocked out by Lara, and the rematch was a no contest. So now, I find an updated ranking, because you can see Kiko Martinez is champion. He knocked out Kid Galahad. And who's ranked at number 4? All of a sudden, Warrington. Warrington is ranked. Boxing is filthy. It's actually just a scumbag sport. Somebody was complaining that I talk more about politics than boxing. Well, boxing is more politics than actual boxing. The messed up thing is the corruption is almost a necessity, I guess, in some way, because if these promoters and sponsors can't make it commercially viable, they're going to walk away. You see, Kiko turning up at Headingley or at Ellen Road against Warrington, it's always going to be a good gate. But does that make it right? Just a routine presser, Spence versus UGAS. UGAS made everybody take a minute of silence for the Ukraine. Spence was counting his blessings that he's getting a second chance at life and another chance at boxing. It's going to be a big week, 16th of April. Spence versus UGAS, that will run into the 23rd of April, where we have Fury versus Dillian White. So that's a big week of boxing. It's good to count your blessings, but just in terms of boxing, I wish Errol Spence nothing but prosperity in his life, but as a boxer, has he counted his blessings a little late with that damaged retina? They do often go again. I can imagine that the operators are a little more sophisticated from when Ray Leonard was having operations on his retina. But you need to adjust your style for the most part to protect that eye. Whether Spence is going to do that or wants to do that, or whether that takes away from him as a fighter, I don't know. It's a good fight regardless anyway. 3 belts on the line. And Spence has been talking about fighting Crawford if he gets past UGAS. And, you know, the PBC shouldn't be standing in the way of a full 4-belt unification, undisputed. They really shouldn't. I guess I should get more information on how the training camps are going and all that good stuff, and look for who's winning the psychological battle. But I'm picking Spence from now. It could be a controversial fight, but there's my pick.